Oh, hello there, and welcome to Veterans Medals Workshop. I'm Frank Foster, your host, and our mission here is, well, to explain every military award from the Army. And today we're going to take a look at the insignia, rank, and badges of the United States Army Vietnam. Hello, glad to have you here today because we have a really interesting program. We're going to go back over 50 years and take a look at the insignia, the rank, and the badges that the soldiers serving, 2.5 million U.S. Army soldiers serving in Vietnam used. We'll take a look at all 29 different branches of the service at that time, depending on how you count, of course. You'll be surprised at 2 that weren't there, and you'll be surprised at the 1 that's no longer there. And then we'll take a look at the enlisted, warrant officer, and officer rank during the Vietnam War, and whatever happened to a Spec 8, well, you'll know now. And then we'll take a look at the combat and skill badges earned by the soldiers who served in Vietnam. And we'll cheat a little bit and also take a look at some of the identification badges of Pentagon warriors. Well, how about the Presidential Identification Badge? And we'll take a look at a couple of the ARVN awards given to the soldiers who served there. Okay, I just want you to know that everything's coming from our newest book, Insignia, Rank, and Badges of the U.S. Army in Vietnam. It's available for you. Well, you can just click on the link below, and it'll take you to the website, and you can flip through the book. I'll show you a little later, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's also available on Amazon. Either way, you can find it. All right, come on. Let's go take a look at the insignia, rank, and badges of the U.S. Army Vietnam. Every soldier arrived in Vietnam wearing a U.S. and a branch insignia. In the example to your right, a young infantry PFC is wearing a U.S. and infantry disc on his right and left collar, along with a special infantry blue cord on his right shoulder. The U.S. disc is a direct descendant of the first official United States Army insignia, the USA buttons worn on the uniform of American Revolutionary soldiers, a tradition carried on for over 200 years. Since World War II, the Army branches have become identified in 3 groups: combat arms, combat support, and combat service support. There are several branches of the detail services which technically do not fit into any of these categories, but we'll consider them combat service support. During the Vietnam War, there were 29 branches in the Army, well, depending on how you count them. The combat arms branches were infantry, field artillery, air defense artillery, armor, and the Corps of Engineers. Aviation did not become a basic branch of the Army until 1983, and the Special Forces until 1987. During the Vietnam War, personnel in those units wore their basic branch insignia. But wait, if cavalry is not a branch, why is its insignia up there? Well, during Vietnam, officers and enlisted personnel assigned to cavalry regiments, cavalry squadrons, or separate cavalry troops were authorized to wear the cavalry collar insignia in lieu of their insignia of branch. During the Vietnam War, the combat support branches were Signal Corps, Military Police, Chemical Corps, and the Military Intelligence Corps. During the Vietnam War, the combat service support branches are shown here, starting in the upper left, and we'll go alphabetically. The Adjutant General Corps, the Army Band, the Chaplains Corps, in this case we're showing Christian and the older Jewish version of the chaplain's insignia, Civil Affairs. The Diamond was the Finance Corps, the General Staff, the Inspector General, the Judge Advocate General Corps, and then in the medical department, the caduceus is shown on your left for both officer and enlisted, and then a special insignia for dental officers, veterinarians, nurses, specialists, and medical service corps. There was a special insignia for the National Guard Bureau, the Ordnance Corps, the Quartermaster Corps, the Signal Corps, which I've also showed you in another reference, so that was my mistake putting it in there. Staff Specialist for the Army National Guard and the U.S. Army Reserve, the Transportation Corps, and then there was a special branch for warrant officers during the Vietnam War. Now, the warrant officer branch has gone away today, but during Vietnam it was a special branch. And then the standard U.S. enlisted insignia. And of course, the book we're building this video from comes with a lot more references in detail. For example, on the infantry branch, it talks about what the role of the infantry is, the branch insignia in detail, the regimental insignia, branch colors, birthdays, and other details about the infantry branch and each of the other branches. Army enlisted rank during the Vietnam War, well, particularly between 1968 and 1979, is shown here, starting in your upper left. At the E9, the highest grade, there was created the Sergeant Major of the Army, the Command Sergeant Major, that's the star within the reef, and then Sergeant Major. Those were the three E9 grades. On the E8 grade, there was First Sergeant, Master Sergeant, and Specialist 8. But Specialist 8 was dropped by 1965 and was no longer a grade. The E7 was Sergeant First Class, 3 up and 2 down, or Specialist E7. And then E6, Staff Sergeant, or Spec 6. And then on your right, Sergeant E5, or Specialist 5th Class, Corporal, or Specialist 4th Class, Spec 4. The E3 was a PFC, and the E2 was a private first class. Well, no, not first class, was private. And that rank came after 1 year in service automatically. The warrant officer rank was created to fill special positions requiring greater technical skill and responsibility than a non-commissioned officer, but without the responsibility of command. In September of 1956, along with the other military services concurring, 4 new warrant officer insignia were approved for use across all of the services. The only difference was that each service used its own unique color on the bar. The first 2 grades in the Army were gold and brown, while the 2 senior grades were silver and brown. Later, in 1972, there were 5 new warrant officer insignia approved, but they didn't really come into play during the Vietnam War. For more information on this subject, just click on the link below. It'll take you right to the website, and you can scroll down and find the book that you're interested in, click on it, and then there's an opportunity to click on the image and you can do a flip book. Only takes 10 seconds. I think you'll find it very interesting. Go take a look. During the Vietnam War, with the exception of the warrant officer grades, the present Army officer rank is the same design as used in World War II. The first one on your upper left is a gold bar for a second lieutenant, and second lieutenants normally spend 6 months of their time in training, preparing for their first assignment in their specialty. The silver bar is a first lieutenant, and that has increased responsibilities with assignments such as executive officer of a company or a junior staff officer. Captain comes from the Latin word meaning head or the Latin word chief, and although a captain can be head of any organization, it's normally associated with officers commanding a company, a battery, or a troop. Major is a 7-pointed gold-colored oak leaf, and it comes from the Latin word greater. The rank initially evolved from the rank of sergeant major in the 16th century, just below lieutenant colonel. Typical assignments are battalion executive officers or a staff officer. The lieutenant colonel rank is a 7-pointed silver oak leaf raised and veined, and the typical assignments are battalion commander or staff officer. Colonel is a silver-colored spread eagle made in pairs, right and left, with the talon of 1 foot grasping an olive branch and the other a bundle of 13 arrows. The typical assignment is a command of a regiment or brigade. Brigadier General is 1 silver-colored star, 1 inch in height, and it means that the officer is no longer a specialist in one area and a general officer. In summary, any officer in general command of all troops. Originally, general ranks were Captain General, Lieutenant General, Sergeant Major General, and Brigadier General. A corporal in the French is also a brigadier. This explains why a lieutenant general outranks a major general, and a major general was originally a sergeant major general. I hope you got all of that. The major general is 2 silver-colored stars, and that's usually the command of a division, a post, or a high-level staff officer. Lieutenant general, 3 silver stars, and that can be normally commanding a corps or a major division of the Army staff, such as the Desk Ops. The rank of general is 4 silver-colored, 5-pointed pyramid-shaped stars, and generals normally command an army, a major command of the army, or serve as chief of staff or vice chief of staff of the army. I should point out that in Vietnam, most of these grades were worn in a subdued manner, such as the black eagle that you see. To start our section on Army badges during the Vietnam War, we'll take a look at the hat badges, buttons, and lapel pins. And in the center is the officer hat badge, which was established in 1903, and it's the National Eagle. To the other side of it is the Army officer female hat badge, and that was established in 1964. It's just a reduced size of a gilt eagle. The Army warrant officer's hat insignia during the Vietnam War is shown in the upper right corner, and it was designed by the Fine Arts Commission in 1921. The warrant officer hat badge became obsolete in 2004, and today warrant officers wear the same hat badge as commissioned officers. On the second row, starting on your left, is the enlisted female hat badge, then the regular Army enlisted hat badge, which goes back to World War II, and for the infantry, you get a special blue trim. The unique insignia on the far right of the second row is the Army band hat badge. Then on the bottom row, or next to the bottom row, is the U.S. insignia that goes on the officer lapels, the enlisted U.S. insignia, the infantry trim for the U.S. insignia, the current Army uniform button, and the Army Engineer Corps officer button, which is unique to the Corps of Engineers. The last row has Reserve Officer Training Insignia, Officer Candidate School, and Warrant Officer Candidate School. The most prestigious Army badge of the Vietnam War was the Combat Infantryman's Badge. It's a silver enamel badge, 1 inch in height and 3 inches wide, and consists of an infantry musket on a light blue bar with a silver border on and over an elliptical oak reef. Stars are added at the top of the reef to indicate subsequent awards. Eligibility is awarded to personnel in the grade of colonel or below with an infantry MOS, military occupation specialty, who successfully performed duty while assigned as a member of an infantry unit when engaged in active ground combat. And while not a combat badge, I should mention the Expert Infantryman's Badge because it is one of the most prestigious non-combat badges and it requires an especially difficult training course to be completed successfully. Another prestigious combat badge was the Combat Medical Badge, which is an oxidized silver badge, 1 inch in height and 1.5 inches wide, and it consists of a stretcher crossed by a caduceus surmounted at the top by a Greek cross, all on and over an elliptical oak reef, and stars are added to indicate subsequent awards. Eligibility is to members of the Medical Corps who are serving in company-sized units attached to combat units during actual ground combat. There's also an Expert Field Medical Badge, which is awarded to medical personnel who pass a very difficult and demanding medical test. The Army Aviator Badge was awarded in 3 levels, starting in your upper left, the Army Aviator, then the Senior Army Aviator, and then the Master Army Aviator. It also came as a subdued badge, as a plated badge, and as a very nice silver badge. There were 3 levels of Flight Sergeant badges, and first was Flight Sergeant, Senior Flight Sergeant, and Master Flight Sergeant. Here are 3 variations of the Aircraft Crew Member's Badge, and that included door gunners. There was the basic aircraft crew member, then the senior aircraft crew member with the star, and then the master aircraft crew member with the star with the reef around it. The parachutist badges, which shown starting on your left, the basic parachutist, which requires graduation from the Army Airborne School at Fort Benning or having 1 combat parachute jump. Then the senior parachutist badge with the star, and that requires a minimum of 30 jumps to include 15 jumps with combat equipment, 2 night jumps, and 1 as a jump master of a stick. The Master Parachutist Badge with the star and the reef requires 65 jumps to include 25 jumps with combat equipment, 4 night jumps, and 1 as jump master of a stick, along with mass tactical jumps. In Vietnam, most paratroopers wore the subdued version as shown on the lower level. A bronze service star is authorized to be worn on the parachute badge to denote a soldier's participation in a combat parachute jump. Here's one badge I'd never had a desire to earn, and that's the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Badge, and it comes in the basic EOD, senior, and master, and it requires you to earn it to be in an EOD unit and approved by the commander. The Ranger tab is awarded by the Commandant of a U.S. Army Infantry School to military personnel who successfully complete the Ranger course, and it's a difficult and challenging one. Officers and enlisted men of the infantry who have been awarded the Combat Infantryman's Badge or Expert Infantry Badge or have completed the basic infantry training courses wear the infantry blue shoulder cord on the right shoulder of the Army dress uniform and full dress uniform. Every soldier assigned to Vietnam qualified for a marksmanship badge as either expert, sharpshooter, or marksman on at least one weapon system. And as you can see, the Army had almost 20 different qualification bars for different weapon systems. The Army also awarded driver and mechanics badges with up to 6 different qualification bars as shown. In the Vietnam War, the Army also authorized scuba badges for certain special operations soldiers. The Pathfinder badge is a gold-colored metal and enamel badge with a gold wing displayed on and over a gold torch with red and gray flames. The Commandant of the U.S. Army Infantry School awards a Pathfinder badge for successful completion of the Pathfinder course. The Parachute Rigger badge was awarded to soldiers who successfully completed the prescribed course of instruction conducted by the U.S. Army Quartermaster School. During the Vietnam War, the Overseas Service Bar was worn on the lower right sleeve instead of the left as in World War II, and the Overseas Service Bar was awarded for each 6 months overseas in a combat zone. Service stripe, traditionally called a hash mark by soldiers, is worn by enlisted soldiers to denote length of service. The Army awards each stripe for 3 years' service, the concept of a service stripe going all the way back to the Civil War. These are only worn on a Class A uniform. We'll wind up by taking a look at some of the identification badges during the Vietnam War. Starting on your left is the Presidential Service Identification Badge, issued to those members of the Army serving on the President's staff. Then to the right of it is the Vice Presidential Service Identification Badge. The next badge, with the big gold eagle, is the Office of Secretary of Defense Identification Badge, and on the far right is a Joint Chiefs of Staff Identification Badge. Other unique badges are the Army Staff Identification Badge, known as the Liver Patch, and you can see why. It's awarded to members of the General Staff assigned generally at the Pentagon. And then the prestigious Guard of the Unknown Soldier Identification Badge, and as it's shown on the right. Another identification badge that every soldier who went through basic training knew by heart is a Drill Sergeant Identification Badge. The other commonly seen badges were the U.S. Army Reserve Recruiter Badge, the National Guard Recruiter Badges, and the United States Army Military Police Badge. 4 unique badges awarded to Army personnel during the Vietnam War are shown here. In the upper left, the South Vietnamese Army Parachute Badge. It came in 3 variations: the South Vietnamese Ranger Badge, the South Vietnamese Special Forces Parachute Badge, and the French Army Parachute Badge. Hey, thanks for watching today, and if you enjoyed this, please give us a thumbs up. Even better, subscribe. It'll keep us on the air. And if you want to see more about this book, just click on the link below and then click on the image of the book and you can flip through it. Easy as pie. Okay, see you next time on Veterans Medals Workshop.